Okay. Hey, everyone.
Cool story time, though.
Yeah? All right, we're live. Hey, everyone. It's Alan Schimmel, CEO, founder of TechStrong Group. We are so happy you're joining us on this very, very special TechStrong Learning event. A little out of the ordinary, instead of talking about some tech vendors or some tools specifically, we're here to talk about an upcoming conference that I think it's 3 years old now, is really, really growing into sort of the premier event for platform engineering in the world. It's called Platform Con. I'm hoping most of you maybe have heard of Platform Con, but if not, this is going to be a really great chance for you to learn about it. And the great thing about Platform Con is it's primarily virtual. So you could be anywhere in the world and tune into it and really get up to speed on what platform engineering is, how it's changing the world of dev and software development and software deployment and infrastructure and everything else. I'm going to introduce us to our panel in just a second. Hold on one second. I know I wrote him.
Okay.
But before I do, let me first take a moment to talk about this Big Marker system that we're on. Big Marker is our webinar platform that we use here. And as you can see, I see some of you are already writing in. Why we love it is, number one, you don't need any plugins. It just plays in your browser. Number two, though, is I love the Big Marker communication panel, which for most of you is on the right-hand side of your browser window. And you'll see chat is probably going to be in black, right? And underneath it is public and private. If you use chat, you can communicate not only with us here on the panel, but with all of the other folks joining us from around the world. And as you can see, a lot of people have already logged in and they're letting us know where they're from. And hello from places like Bulgaria and India and Greece and Australia, and a few people from Australia, it looks like, and Kenya. Wow, I love having people from Africa, and Kenya is fantastic. You know, I've been on the internet pretty much since the internet went commercial and before that. And one of the things that always still gets me going is when I just log on here from my desktop, but I'm literally talking to people from all over the world. And so please log on, tell us where you're from, say hello. More importantly, though, I want to make sure that chat works for you, because the way we're going to do this today is that you, our audience, are going to have an active role in what we talk about. So we want you to use chat. We want you to use Q&A, which is next to chat, to let us know what questions you may have or what comments or thoughts you may have around the topics we're going to be talking about in regard to platform engineering and Platform Con. So please, just keep the comments going, keep the chat moving. Feel free, if someone asks a question and you want to piggyback on it, do that as well. This is really meant to be an interactive panel with not just the four of us, but with all of you. Okay, before I introduce our panel members, one other quick thing. We did pin up at the top of the chat a link to click to register for Platform Con. Right, Platform Con is still about 3.5 weeks out, something like that. And you can still register right now virtually. And I mentioned it's primarily virtual. There are some in-person events at Platform Con this year. One will be in London, and we'll get the details on that in a second. I believe one is in Austin, Luca, is that correct? And one or possibly two will be in New York City. And you can go there in person too. Those registrations are either up or will be up. But to register for Platform Con, please click that link right there pinned on top. Let me now introduce you to our panel. I'm going to introduce by name, and they'll give you a little background on themselves. First, I'm going to introduce you to really one of the guys I think makes Platform Con what it is. Joining us from Spain today, Luca Galente. Hey, Luca, how are you?
Good to be here.
Excellent. Luca, if you don't mind, give people a little bit of your background.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I work in product at Humanitech, and probably people know me more for what you were talking about, which is contributing to the platform engineering community. I write Platform Weekly that goes out every week to about 40,000 people. Being very active in the platform engineering Slack, which is also a core component of PlatformCon in general. There are now, I think, 20,000 people in there. And I host PlatformCon, which is what we're here to talk about today, partially as well. As you said, it's been really growing like wildfire. It was, I think, like 6,000 people just 2 years ago, 22,000 people last year. We're expecting 35,000 this year. And yeah, expanding with in-person stuff all over the globe. So exciting.
Excellent. And we were talking a little off camera, Luca. I think we're already up to about 19,000 registrants for this year's event. Last year, if I'm not mistaken, was close to 25, right?
Yeah, 22. And now we're about there. It's just that you normally see the last like 3-4 weeks, it just goes bananas,
30,
right?
30 to 40% usually come in those last
Yeah.
couple of weeks, we know.
Exactly.
So this will probably be the biggest one. That's fantastic. Anyway, thanks for joining us. Let me introduce our next panel member, and I'm going to try, but I'm not great with names, but I'll do the best we can here. I thought it was Kansu, but it's Sansu. How do you?
It's Jansu.
Chansu, right? And Chansu Kavili Ornek.
Yeah, that was perfect.
All right, well, we got part of it right. Chansu, if you wouldn't mind, give folks maybe a little bit of your background.
Sure. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. My name is Jansu. I'm a senior architect at Red Hat. What I do is I usually work with organizations to bring their ambitious ideas or like challenging problems into turn them into reality, help them to achieve those outcomes. But mainly, I help them to build platforms that fit for purposes that is gonna help for their internal people, internal developers' life easier. And that is what I usually talk around, and that's why I'm really excited about to be here, where I can really share my experiences from the field, from actually like the practitioners, how they achieve this, and how we help them to get there. So I'm super excited to be here, really.
Excellent, and it's excellent to have you here. And then our last, but certainly not least, panel member joining us from Boulder, Colorado, high up in the Rocky Mountains. AJ, and I'll again do my best with the last name here. AJ Chankaramath, or Chankaramath.
That's close enough, Alan. So yeah, that's good.
AJ, if you wouldn't mind, share a little bit of your background.
Absolutely. So thank you for being here, everyone. I'm Ajay Chankramath. I head the platform engineering team and the practice at ThoughtWorks. If you haven't heard of ThoughtWorks, we have been around for about 30 years, and everything that Alan spoke about. So application development, application delivery, application infrastructure activities, as well as the process, agile techniques, a lot of those things sort of came out of ThoughtWorks over the past many, many years. So currently, I'm privileged to be running the platform engineering team here. So what do I do? You can definitely check out our website to see what we do, but we do a lot of work that we're actually going to be talking about today on the platform side of things. We do platform as a product. We do a lot of bleeding edge, platform orchestration work, and a lot of very interesting things. So again, ThoughtWorks primarily does a lot of consulting, and I have been in this industry for way too longer than I would like to admit. So I've done pretty much anything that you can imagine within the software field. So glad to be here.
I know how you feel. Glad to have you here. All right. So Luca, we spoke a little bit about PlatformCon. It is the premier event for platform engineering. I'm going to assume a lot of people who are logging on here are, at least somewhat familiar with platform engineering. But if we had to say, give me a brief history of the platform engineering movement.
Yeah. So, I mean, platform engineering, I think, started way before I frankly got involved. I think it started about 10, 15 years ago, really in its early forms. because, and it really started with the kind of like larger tech companies who basically, were the first one to realize, okay, this whole like DevOps thing of like shift everything left and, you build it, you run it is cute, but it doesn't scale. When I'm adding like hundreds of developers every month, which is literally what, the Airbnbs and the Googles were doing, to an increasingly complex cloud native setup, I can't expect every newcomer to, familiarize themselves with this entire tool chain end to end and being able to do everything on their own. So they realize that, if you're like 20, 30 engineers and everybody's like really familiar with your Terraform files and your Helm scripts and so on and so forth, it's fine. You can actually do DevOps. But if you're talking at enterprise scale in increasingly complex setups, you can't really do that. And so they figured, okay, we need to build some sort of platform layer here in between our infrastructure and operations team and our application development teams. And that's when they started basically building platforms and doing platform engineering. That has then slowly trickled down to sort of like broader and bigger parts of the market in the last, I think, 5 to 10 years, and especially in the last, I think, 3 to 5 has really, really accelerated. We were speaking before going live about it. We were, when we created the Slack channel, I think there were maybe like, the first 300-400 people were really just like diehard. Hey, I've been building platforms for 10 years. I just didn't know it was called platform engineering. And finally, there is a place that I can come and share my stories and kind of listen to best practice and figure out, hey, what do we do here? And ever since, this thing really has caught fire, right? Like we now have 20,000 people in the Slack, and there's so many people that are considering this even almost as not necessarily as an entry level job, but certainly as something like, hey, I want to go for that right away, instead of something that kind of like infrastructure people ended up doing because it was needed, like it used to be. And so I think it's super exciting. It's still very, very, new, and there's a lot of different moving parts, which is why I think the conversation today is so important, because the hottest trends, in my opinion, are the standards, really, and thing that people are looking at as like, okay, let's standardize how we talk about platform engineering. Let's standardize how we do platform engineering, and what the benefits can be for the developers and for the organizations broadly, because that's how we advance. And I think importantly, that's also how we avoid the fate of other hype cycles that ended up in places where, hey, what does it actually mean to do DevOps or GitOps or these things, right? And there's a lot of confusion, even what the definition is, which is why I think this conversation is so important.
Excellent. All right. Hey, I think our audience is getting restless. They've heard enough about PlatformCon, enough about maybe the history of platform engineering. Let's dive into some of the topics we wanted to cover. The first one I want to cover is platform as a product. DevOps kind of introduced and codified a lot of sort of concepts and acronyms and, kind of built into the culture, if you will, because so much of it is cultural. And one of them is the concept of minimally viable product, right? MVP, and it's okay to get out there with an MVP. Now, building an entire platform is a task, right? I mean, it's not easy, especially when you're talking at scale. And some may tell you it's never done, right? It's always a work in progress. But at some point, you got to just, you bet you make your bets and you let the horses run. So, platform, getting out there with platform as a product. Where are we? How would you best describe that? AJ, this sounds like something really kind of up your alley. What's the advice for folks out there?
Yeah, absolutely, Alan. So this has been that fundamental shift, that tectonic shift that we have seen over the past several years. So Luca talked a little bit about that history of doing platform-related work, evolving from that culture of DevOps about 10, 15 years back. The primary difference from the older way of doing things, because from the beginning of time, whenever we used to build software, we used to have processes and techniques and all that. What really changed was that product mindset, because we all have been building products for many, many years. When we started applying products to those internal work, the internal products or internal platforms or internal automation that we started doing, that changed the whole behavior of what was coming out of it. What changed? It was very simple, right? So every product has got a life cycle. So just like that, a platform has also got a life cycle. So one of the things that you just mentioned, Alan, was that, so this platform work would entail a lot of things within that space. So how do you know if a platform work is done? So when we speak, Luca and I were there at a conference a few weeks back, and we had a really nice round table, and we were talking to people. One of the gentlemen was talking about, can you tell me when I'm going to be done with my platform? The response to that is, you're never going to be done with the platform because it is a product, right? It's going to evolve over time. So then it becomes like, what are the attributes that you should really have in your product, right? So for a platform product, there are some key attributes that we have to bring in. Things like, again, this is not rocket science. So this is simple stuff that we have seen from the beginning of time. Can you make your platform product composable? Can you have replaceability features in it? Now, a lot more than ever, we are really talking about empowering developers, right? I know that we'll get into this topic later, that whole developer experience side of things. So could you actually have your product really make sure that it is making your developers a lot more productive by giving them that kind of autonomy to do it? So these are some of the key aspects of it. And at PlatformCon, we're going to have some amazing discussions on it, including one of my panelists who is actually going to be talking about it. So I would love to hear from her.
Yeah. So thank you, AJ. But as you said, that the product mindset is bringing that really interesting shift to when we are talking about how to build our platforms. Because if you think about this product management 101, like there are these three pillars that you put your product on top of it. Like it's desirability, it's feasibility, and it's viability. So you need to think about answers to these questions, like desirability, like who is our users, who is going to use this, who is going to get benefit from this, or like feasibility, like is it technically possible to build this thing, like what kind of technology we're going to use. And when it comes to viability, how are we going to sustain this thing? Like, how are we going to make this thing evolve over time? So there should be these things that we need to think of this, and there should be like some personas, or the team needs to look after these things. So when you bring the product mindset, it's kind of push you to force you to think of these things instead of just, oh, Kubernetes is cool. Now we are doing containers, so we have a container platform, yay. So what we've seen over the years is that before really jumping into this building the platform, it makes sense to build a foundation of this product mindset first, and how this applies to platform space. So me and my team, a couple of years ago, we created these workshops called Platform as a Product, just to make people excited about the idea, make people understand what it is, and make people to speak the same language when they say platform, like what this platform actually means for their organization. And it's just like a half day of a workshop that helps them to get kind of coming up with a not like a roadmap, but like a bit of an action plan under it, like where we can start, how we can start. And in PlatformCon, we are talking about these workshops, and we run this workshop in many different countries with many different type of organizations, FSI, governments, etc. And what we learned from this. So we share this in our talk. So we would be really happy if you would like to check this talk. I put in the chat, and you can, we can have conversations about this after you check the talk as well. So.
Excellent. Hey, we've got a question over in the QA, pretty specific. Andre, he knows Backstage as a tool to build developers' platform. Any other initiative to build platforms, I guess, similar or competitive to Backstage? AJ, Luca?
Yeah, let me take a shot at that, and I'm sure all of us would like to chime in on it. So Backstage is what we typically call as an internal developer portal, right? It is not typically a platform, right? The way to think about it is that And again, another shameless plug, if you want to check out my talk at PlatformCon, there are some things that I'm talking about there, as well as from some phenomenal speakers from Syntasso and all that who's talking about this. So when you really look at building a platform, there are three ways to approach it, right? I would say the most popular way that is out there is something like a developer-centric way of doing it, which is where this internal developer portal would come in. Things like Backstage would come in. There are a lot of alternatives to Backstage. If Backstage is a great tool, but if that's not what's working for you, there are so many different alternatives out there. But the question really becomes like, once you make your portal developer-centric, the challenge is that you sort of increase your operational burden, right? So that is a challenge, right? Because you're not only now removing the toil or the kind of friction for the operations folks, you're sort of increasing that, where the developers are having it slightly easier. But now the problem is that, okay, can we actually shift it to a more operation-centric way of doing it? Could you do something that is a lot more Kubernetes-centric and all that? Now, the good thing about it is that, yeah, it's operationally, it's pretty good. It's very stable. Now your developers have to have increased cognitive load. They need to learn more. So which is where we really would love to see more of a platform engineering centric way of building the internal developer platforms. And that's where the tools and the products like Humanitech that Luca's company does comes into play. There are some alternatives within that space. Again, in my presentation, I look at some alternatives. But the whole idea of things like a platform engineering centric way of looking at an alternative is that it doesn't really want you to sort of replace your ecosystem, right? Because you already have your CI, you already have your CD, you already have all the whole tool sets within that. Now the question becomes, how do you make them all work together better? How do you orchestrate that? And that's where the real power of those internal developer platforms are, in my mind. Luca, Chansu?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I recently gave a talk about this, and I think, there's this blog post that I'm going to share here with everybody from Aaron Erickson. He's the guy that built the internal developer platform at Salesforce a few years ago. And he's basically saying, look, building an internal developer platform is like building a house, right? And you would never start from the front door, right? You would start from the foundation, you would start, and so in the case of the platform, you'd start building the kind of like the back-end logic of your platform, right? And the problem is that we see this anti-pattern a lot of people starting from the front end first because it's easier, because it's it's a nice, pretty dashboard that executives like, and it kind of like it gives you the feeling of like, hey, I'm doing great, I'm doing platform engineering, everything is fantastic. And while certainly you are making some progress, the problem is that usually people then invest, especially something like Backstage, right? It can take you up to like 6 months to like properly implement it in an enterprise. And then you've invested so much time, resources, and money that, then it becomes its own beast, and you start trying to like shoehorn logic into it instead of actually building a proper foundation to your house, a proper backend. And that's where a lot of the kind of the problems downstream can happen. And so, what we normally recommend in the community is start from the backend first. There you normally have two options. There's a pipeline-based backend, which is kind of what most people are used to, right? You have some CI, some CD, you have some Terraform scripts, and that's fine for simple use cases. Again, though, it doesn't tend to scale with more complex logic. In fact, it sort of like non-linearly scales in the sense that your configuration files, both on the application side of things and infrastructure side of things, will usually explode and will become really hard to kind of like maintain and scale with. And then you have graph-based backends, which is stuff like platform orchestrators, like Humanitech, that are designed precisely for this kind of enterprise scale and lets you manage that in a smoother way.
But it also goes back to the thing that you said, Ellen, about minimum viable product, or in platformer, there is also this thinnest viable platform notion starts to pick up after team topologies. So the important thing is especially with this product mindset, is to understand your users, understand what's the most burning pain points and what kind of things you can do to address those things with your platform. And it doesn't have to be necessarily a very fancy UI. It could be really just a couple of YAML files or just like a wiki page where you guide them. But the important thing is that you need to talk with your users, you need to understand them and have this iterative mindset where you can keep build on top of it and address actually their needs, not like having this fancy graphs as Luca said. So it's important to understand that this is an iterative approach, and if you try to do it with Big Bang, with some backstage or some other tools, you might actually miss the addressing your users' needs. They would still wait for a couple of months for you to actually provide something simple, but you spend your time to build things around that simple thing. So it's important to actually understand that this is more about creating something for work for them and basically discovering what is that thing. So.
Alan, if you don't mind, I may add just one other point, right? I mean, so Jansu's point was excellent. Really understand what you want to do first before you really start doing something, right? Know what problem are you trying to solve. I would go one step further, right? Saying that have some clear metrics as to what you want to really achieve, right? Because this whole idea of improving your developer productivity using platforms is, that can have an infinite scale. So you really need to know what's your 80-20 rule, what's really going to give you the ROI for those investments. So once you actually make that, come up with that metric, know what you're really trying to do, then all these tools are at your disposal to, at times, and most of the times, combine these two. So we talked about Backstage, we talked about Manitech, we talked about all the CI/CD tools. That whole ecosystem becomes something that is combined, everything.
Excellent. I see, Luca, you put in on the question on open source alternatives. Just real quickly, audience, feel free to use either the chat or Q&A for any thoughts, questions, comments, and the panel here will try to answer. But let's move on to another topic that we want to hit on, and that is blueprints, battle-tested blueprints. For those who may not be familiar, what do we mean by battle-tested blueprints? Chansu, would you like to answer that, or?
Is it more related with some sort of a reference architectures for platform? I'm not exactly. Is it?
Yeah. We're talking about the reference architectures. I can share here a link of what we open sourced a while back. But basically, this is kind of, if you look back at PlatformCon 23, actually, that's when we first kind of started popularizing this idea of the REST architectures. It now, I think, has really started taking off. You see a lot of people using it, both vendors and, consultants like ThoughtWorks and actually a lot of enterprise practitioners. They're using this as a standard to talk about things, right? Because if I look back, even just a year ago, there was a lot of excitement about platform engineering. Hey, yeah, the promise is great, developer self-service, all of this, all of that. But what does this thing actually look like, right? And so people were really struggling. Okay, I look at the CNCF landscape, and there's 20,000 different things. Where do I start? How do I put this together, right? And so that's where we. Humanitech, together with McKinsey and other folks, and I mean we've worked a lot with ThoughtWorks as well on this. We started kind of distilling what we've learned from looking at hundreds of platform engineering initiatives, right? Especially in the enterprise, and really kind of trying to figure out, okay, what does best practice look like? And that's what we packed into those reference architectures. The idea is to organize the internal developer platform around 5 planes. So there is a developer control plane, there's effectively a CI/CD plane, there's a security plane, resource plane, monitoring and logging. And we were talking before about where do you start from the front end, from the back end. I think using again the reference architecture is a very helpful tool in that sense, because you can effectively look at the developer control plane as sort of your front end. That's where, something like a portal could sit, but also like Chansu was saying, just like a YAML file, like Score, which is the one that I shared in the chat, or any other code-based interface, which, by the way, is what we have seen, at least in the community. Most developers are more friendly towards than, hey, there's this like new UI that I need to jump into to do things. Like, meet your developers where they're at, which is usually code-based workflows and Git-based workflows. But that aside, right, like that's your front end basically, and then you can see the kind of like integration delivery plane. That's your back end. That's where you can have pipeline-based backends, where you can have graph-based backends with orchestrators. And so I just think these blueprints have been really helpful. I mean, even just for me personally, to speak about it with people, right? Like when I'm events like KubeCon, we took Level, KubeCon offline. These like being able to just show this immediately like makes the conversation so much easier. Because otherwise you're just like it's hard to pin it down to, okay, what are we actually talking about and what are we actually trying to solve?
Yeah, this has been one of the bigger challenges, right? I mean, so as Luca mentioned, us at ThoughtWorks, we have been doing this work even before we started calling it platform engineering, right? So we have built over the years, we have built this huge critical mass of learnings from how people think about it, what are the kind of problems that we see. So what we ended up doing was that my team started creating blueprints and certain kinds of views that actually scoped platform engineering well. This is another point of confusion, right? When people talk about platform engineering, sometimes it turns out to be a lot more abstract than it should be. It is not that abstract, and it is a very specific activity that we're talking about. So like Luca said, when you really look at something like blueprints, the kind of things that we're really looking at are things like your core infrastructure, whether it is storage, compute, networking, all that kind of stuff, then you're really looking at things like your platform services, your IAM, the observability side of things, your security and those kinds of things. Then, of course, the interesting part around your development and deployment tools, whether it's runtime as well as your IAC and things like that. Then a huge part of any kind of blueprint would be something like a data management. So you have all your data coming in. Where are you storing it? How are you analyzing those kinds of things? Then that experience level comes in, right? Which is something that people tend to miss, which is also the reason why we always talk about API management as part of that blueprint. So essentially, it's not just on the UX side of things, right? So again, like all kinds of front-end frameworks that we spoke about already. How do we actually manage the gateways and things like that? So I think doing all those things really helps with things like your scalability, your reliability, your security, your interoperability, all the things that we typically expect a platform product to have. So that's the whole idea behind having that blueprint.
I think these kind of things will really speed up people who are at the beginning of their journey or want to improve their platform. And I think the important thing is that like understand like kind of like research what is out there and how this thing would work in their organization, because it's again like the Spotify model conversation, like taking something and put it into your organization and expected it to work as a magic because it's worked somewhere over there, but more understand how this would kind of help your needs or address your need in your organization. So having this kind of like things in your kit bag is like super useful for you to get into walk, like from crawl to walk stage. But then the next thing you should look for is like, okay, how this is actually, make it more useful, more intuitively to my developer community, to my internal customers, etc. So these things like really great. And I don't know personally the Humanitex link, so I thank you, Luca, for sharing that. I'll definitely look for that.
Well, and obviously Red Hat is massive, but we're starting to collaborate with Red Hat as well on some of these reference architectures. So there's going to be some specific OpenShift ones and so on. They're also coming soon. So you'll like those, Chance.
One of the things that I also like to do when I'm engaging with organizations, especially if they're at the beginning, is to do like a silver threading, touching all those, like finding a use case that can touch all those layers, like the monitoring bits, the API management layer, and etc., and prove actually that platform engineering mindset or this like approaching platforms, building the platforms, this like the product mindset actually would work for them. So it would be useful for people to figure out like find a use case, set some measurable outcomes on that, like AJ said, and create those like capabilities around that use case and prove that actually there is a more better and fun way for your developers to work. So this could actually help you to sell this idea to your organization, maybe. So like this, create your platform start your platform engineering efforts within your organization, and with these blueprints, you could just get very up to speed quickly.
Hey, I just want to jump in. We're getting some terrific give and take in the chat, a lot of good stuff. But I want to go to Q&A. Two specific ones just came up here. One was, can an API-orientated service be considered a platform? Think of M2M services or platform to be consumed by AI agents. Look, it's a strange new world that we're getting with 71% of all traffic on the internet is API traffic. AI is just blowing up, right? How all of this works.
Yeah, let me take that, Alan. So I think it's an interesting question, right? I mean, so we first have to really talk about not really conflating a lot of different concepts, together as a platform. Every platform should have an API, in my opinion, right? I mean, that is a standard that we see a lot more. But now the question really becomes, what is the platform doing? Let's dumb this down. I mean, the simplest way to think about it is, are we really helping the economies of scale? Are we actually abstracting out the things that are common across multiple users, multiple user bases, multiple use cases, to actually create a layer that can be reused? Now, it's not just reuse, right? We talked about some of the attributes. I mean, so we've been talking about some of the key attributes to this. Does your platform provide you that self-serve capabilities so that your developers can do certain things? APIs obviously does that, right? I mean, so that's a good way to do it. Another one is like, does it actually provide you with some of the abilities that we talk about? The composability, the replaceability, some of those kinds of things are key. So if your platform is built in such a way that you are not really getting wedded to a particular technology. I mean, we talked about Humanitech, we talked about Backside, we talked about a lot of different tools getting integrated. The whole IDP would make sense only if you are able to replace any of these components at any given point of time, because we can't be, I mean, none of us want to be vendor locked, right? That's the last thing you want to be. So are you really bringing in some of those capabilities into your platforms? So that's the kind of criteria that we should be looking for. So we have, again, and we have published a checklist that actually lets you go through a set of questions, and a questionnaire that can tell you, like, hey, is this something that should be a platform versus not? And that's a good way to look at it. So right now, I think one thing we need to be super careful is not to call everything a platform, because if everything is a platform, then nothing is a platform, and then we continue to confuse that whole narrative, right? But look for some of these key things I spoke about, and that should drive your decision on whether something is a platform, whether something should be built as a platform. Why so? The key point that we talked about earlier, right? Because then it becomes a product, and it's got a product life cycle, and then you can really treat that as a product. So that's how I look at that.
Frank also in the Q&A section, he brings up a point. SAP has BTP, Oracle has an application platform, Autodesk has Fusion. How do they differ from some of the more, not open source, but some of the more edgy stuff that we've discussed here? These are just platforms that, are commercialized, and it is maybe that the end game of all these platforms, that they are commercialized. And let's not be naive, even open source tools become commercialized, right? By companies. So agree with Frank, disagree with Frank, panel? What do you think?
Again, I think the challenge is that when we talk about platform engineering, what we are really talking about is more of that infra layer, that engineering layer, right? I mean, so let's call that an engineering platform. Now, when we really look at the platforms that are out there, there are the more popular platforms are your experience platforms, right? I mean, so your Uber and those kinds of Netflix and those things are all platforms. Those are experience platforms. Now there is this component in between that, which is where a lot of commercialization is happening, which is on the business platform side of things, right? This is where if you actually take an engineering platform, all these concepts of platforms that we've been talking about, now start applying that to your banking and financial services industry, or applying that to your automotive industry and apply that to various verticals, that's where you really start seeing the benefits from that end user point of view. So yes, it is a platform. It is not an engineering platform, but always look at it like, is there an engineering platform, is there a business platform, or an experience platform? And use these same attributes there.
Don't disagree at all. Look, we have some excellent chats going back and forth here in the chat, and people expressing their views on a lot of this. And I don't want to inhibit that. And panel, feel free to log in. I don't know if necessarily we bring it up to this level, and we're running on time. I need to get to our next topic if it's okay. And this is actually my favorite one that I wanted us to discuss today, and that is DevEx and infrastructure, right? Developer experience. Luca, you mentioned early on, one of the issues I think with DevOps was, or is, that in the whole shift left thing, from too many people, it became a question of, oh yeah, put it on the developer's plate. Put that straw on the developer's back until the developer's back breaks, right? I don't think that was the intent, but unfortunately, a lot of times it worked out like that. So now in developer and infrastructure platform engineering, there's an inherent relationship there. They have to work hand in hand, in my mind, for it to be successful. If they don't, it's not successful. Because you can take the horse to water, but you can't make them drink, and so there's that inherent partnership between DevEx and infrastructure platform. Thoughts on that? How does that manifest itself? Take it.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, right? Because, and I was recently writing about this because I feel like a lot of the focus has been rightly so on the developer experience, right? You want to optimize developer self-service. You want to build this layer to kind of like abstract the complexity away from the developer. And then the question is like, okay, what is the right level of abstraction? What is the right level of context that I still want to provide to developers? Because it should be a golden path, not a golden cage. All of those considerations on the kind of the DevEx layer, which is really, really important. But I feel like in all of this, in the last year, 2 years, we've really kind of left behind a little bit the infrastructure and operation side of things. And we speak with a lot of, again, enterprise teams that are looking at platform engineering initiatives, and they're like, and you have the I&O teams, the infrastructure and operations team, they're kind of like, okay, well, what's in it for me, right? Like, why should I care, right? And like Chancellor was saying earlier, like, it's so important that you get everybody on board, right? Like, one of the key thing about platform engineering is that it touches all these different parts of your engineering organization. So, you can't just kind of like, okay, hey, like there's one stakeholder group that likes it, let's go with it. No, you need to be able to speak the C-level language and get them on board. You need to speak to the infrastructure and operations team and the developers, right? And you usually have, and then security architects. You can have a lot of different stakeholders. And that's why, you should start small and iterate quickly with the kind of like minimum viable platform that we touched on earlier. But on the infrastructure and operations team, so the question becomes, what is the key value proposition for them, right? And I think a lot of times is, well, right now you're still just fighting all these ticket ops, right? Effectively, because you are you're seen as this kind of vending machine of infrastructure from the application development teams, right? It's like, hey, I just like, I click a button or I send like a Slack message, and then there is somebody on the I&O teams that actually need to like respond to that and stand up yet another Postgres database for the 10th time, right? And that's not efficient. It creates a lot of friction between teams, and it's just not a great experience on either side of that fence. And so again, the key value prop here is to remove that fence, is for infrastructure and operations team to see the platform as the automated vending machine for their infrastructure, so that they can set these definitions, these infrastructure rules once, and those are automatically enforced, across all your workflows, across all your development teams, without them having to be involved and being frustrated. And on the flip side, without developers being frustrated and having to wait on them, they can just actually self-serve things, right? And so, and again, I think this really goes back to, and maybe Chancellor, you want to jump in, this idea, right, of like building this like really tight feedback loop with the different stakeholders, right? Because you need to get them all on board.
Exactly, and actually, one of the reasons that we recently started seeing is the reason of lack of adoption to platform is actually not engaging with all the relative stakeholders. Because as Luca said, we've been focusing on DevEx so much, and that's totally right. Like they're at the heart, we are building this platform for them, but there are all these other stakeholders that we need to get their input, we need to get their buy-in, we need to get their evangelism with the platform. Within the organization, and actually in PlatformCon we have another talk called driving the platform adoption and how to make stakeholders to engage about that, because that's one of the reasons that we started to see the adoption at the beginning starts really good, but then you kind of actually achieve a local optimization, let's say, like onboarding the applications or like deploying the application side. But as Luca said, if developers need to go out of the platform that you create but has to wait somewhere in 2 or 3 days, you are actually still not improving the overall processes. And mainly the goal is actually taking the source code from a developer's laptop and put it into the hands of the actual users, actually commercial users of the customer. That's why you need to look at the overall process, identify the right stakeholders for it, and make them engage. And another thing for this DevEx that we kind of see with the platform teams is like many customers, like not everybody can swipe a credit card and go onto AWS and go onto Google or something and do their things while they are waiting on the platform side, on the infrastructure side. And that's all goes actually back to the product mindset again, because when we talk about platform as a product, one of the biggest product characteristic is to no one is kind of buying you to buy, like forcing you to buy a product. Like no one is kind of making you to buy something unless it really simplifies something for you or solves a problem for you. So even though when I engage with different customers, especially like heavy security, governmental like customers, many engineers has that mindset that they have to use this platform anyhow, like no matter how it is, like there's no alternative to it because they cannot go up to cloud, go to internet for that, etc. But one of the product characteristics is to make the product as compelling as it is, because no one has to, it's because it is optional. So we keep asking the organizations to keep have this mindset that platform should be optional. But maybe it's not actually optional, but you have to think that I need to build this so compelling. They don't have to go other places. They don't have to look at other places. So this kind of put the developers and everybody else around the platform at stake. You put them in your mind and engage them, build the feedback loops with them, and create something that actually address their needs. So this is also another thing next to the stakeholders that you should maybe think about when it comes to DevEx, that this platform you build optional, even though it's not maybe optional, but it is optional.
Let me jump in with a very specific example, right? One of the things that we have recently published, and we've been speaking about it for a while, is how do you measure this value for all these stakeholders that Chansu is talking about, right? So now we talk about developers, right? So let's say if you build a platform capability, if that saves X amount of hours or some percentage of productivity improvement for your developers who are actually writing the code, that's a win. But you also now start thinking about how is that going to help your compliance folks? How is that actually going to help your folks who are actually doing the operations work, the SRE work? How is that really helping anybody in that whole overall life cycle of that food chain? I think that's a way to really figure out, are you really bringing in the right kind of value by bringing those products? So always think about all the stakeholders really who's actually making the difference. Sometimes we use that word and we overload the word developer, but sometimes what we really mean at that point is to really look at who are all the stakeholders, how are they saving the money, then really trying to save the time and money, and then end of the day, that really becomes your decision point.
Excellent. Hey, I got to jump in. So another question over in the Q&A was, there are many customers who've defined their platform engineering as a journey from automation, right, to advanced automation and developing self-service catalogs. is this an authentic approach? Kind of, it's platform engineering. Any one of the three of you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can quickly jump in. Yeah, I mean, I think like for me, one of the key, the key value proposition again to especially the operation side of things is this idea of automation and standardization, right? Is you don't have to answer this request one by one. Everything is handled automatically by the platform, and you can be sure that the platform is enforcing the latest security standards, the latest compliance standards, and so on and so forth across all the workflows in your organization, all the deployment flows, and so on. So, and then on top of that, right? And so that's usually what the platform orchestrator, for instance, does, the backend, right? And then on top of that, you can build this kind of like catalogs, right? This portals effectively that are interfaces into that, into your internal developer platform that then let developers see things, let executives see things and understand it, and you can have an observability layer, and you can kind of like consume pre-configured templates. But again, I think the important thing to understand is a lot of the value is created in the back end of the platform. The front end is yet another front end, is yet another like interface. A portal is one. You can have code base. There's different ones like we talked about.
Absolutely. We got so many great friggin' questions here. So platform engineering residing as part of DevOrg versus I&O org. I have my thoughts, but I'm not the panel, I'm the moderator. Go ahead. AJ, what do you think?
Yeah, so this is one of the oft-repeated questions that we get. Is that an part of the dev organization or some other organization? So for those of you who are not familiar with team topologies, the place I would really ask you to do is to go start checking that out. Manuel Pace, one of the authors of team topologies, is actually speaking at PlatformCon, if I'm not mistaken, this year too. So the answer to that is somewhat, I would say, it depends on your organization. Ultimately, what you really want to have is to make sure that you provide the right kind of autonomy to your platform engineering teams, and there is that relationship between platform engineers and all the platform engineering concepts and your developers through the same thing that we spoke about like 20 times already today, that product management. So we call that role as a technical product management. So for us, that's that connective tissue that works. Make sure that wherever this platform engineering team resides, whether that resides in I&O or whether that resides in the actual engineering organization, if you don't have that platform product thinking, if you don't have the technical product owner that is managing the kind of requirements and making sure that the right kind of adoption is there, it's going to fail. Gone are the days in which we say that, yeah, we build it right and they will come. No, they're not going to come, right? I'm sorry to say that. They will come only if that is actually going to improve their lives. So you can't force people to use it. One of the clients that we work with, they have 15,000 engineers and they have like CEO level mandates that says that everybody will use XYZ. And the problems that comes around, even when you have a decree like that, is the fact that your overall developer experience or the user experience drastically drops. So you have to build things right, and that has to be the part of how you decide how these teams are set up and where these teams reside.
Fair. Any other chance, Luca? Any thoughts on that? Good. So guys, we only got a few minutes left. This went in the blink of an eye, right, as they usually do. I wanted to give each of you a chance to kind of, final thoughts. And for those in the audience who were worried that we were just going to do a promo for PlatformCon, I hope you were satisfied with the discussion, because it seemed to be a great discussion. But let's be fair, PlatformCon is coming. And if you like this discussion, you're going to love, was it 3 days, Luca, right, of PlatformCon this year?
It's a full week this year.
Oh,
so it's going to, from the, what is it, the 10th? Yeah, the June 10th to the 14th, yeah.
Yep. So again, the link is right up there in the and pinned to the top of the chat. You can register. Also, I have one other favor to ask of the audience. The only way we can make these kinds of webinars better is getting your feedback. We have up in the handouts section, if you click handouts up near your chat where it says chat QA polls handouts, there's two handouts there. One is the click to register link for platform. One is our 1 minute survey. And I do mean it's 1 minute. Just to give us your thoughts of what you like to see. Do you want to see slides? Do you not want to? We don't do as many slides anymore. Most people don't want to see slides. But if you do, we'd love to hear that. Take the survey. It helps make these better. And if they're better, you enjoy them more and the world's a better place. So if you wouldn't mind doing that. Last thoughts. AJ, why don't you kick us off?
You're muted, AJ.
Sorry about that. So the way I would like to do this is I would like to tie it back to some of the key presentations that you should be looking out for at PlatformCon, right? So some of the main things, IDPs, check out, Nikki's and Manuel's actually, discussions on building effective IDPs and, IDPs for developer productivity kind of things that we spoke about. On the automation and tooling, again, phenomenal speakers in Brian Finster and Kelsey Hightower, people like that. They have some amazing talks coming up on, automation of everything. And again, really thinking about from the point of view, what are those next-gen tooling? What's coming up for the platform engineers? What are the newer tools that are coming in? DevEx side of things, probably most of you know Charity Majors from Honeycomb, right? And check out her talk. I mean, she always speaks at PlatformCon. This year also, she's doing some amazing conversations on developer experience. So think about it. And again, Gregor Hope, I'm sure most of you know it. It used to be a thought worker right now at AWS, doing a great talk at that. Platform as a product, Chansu's talk is definitely worth listening to. But another one I really love, a phenomenal speaker, Mallory High, from Humanitech. I think she's doing a talk about what's happening in the field. So something to think about there. So there are some interesting conversations about open source contributions. There are some. I think there's the CEO of Loft Labs is talking. I think that's going to be a really interesting one. The one that I always talk about is this observability and monitoring side of things, to me, which is one of the most important thing within this whole platform engineering space. There's some amazing talks on that one. And then one thing I'd love seeing this time was Anne Curie's talk about the sustainability side of things. I don't know if you read her recent book on sustainability. My team here at ThoughtWorks does this open source tool called Cloud Carbon Footprint. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. And it's a phenomenal tool we have open sourced. But definitely don't miss this Anne Curie's talk there, talking about sustainable engineering. So I think this week is going to be the week of PlatformCon is going to be phenomenal. I think you would literally get the answers to the topic of what we are talking about today, the hottest trends there. So,
thank you, AJ. Thank you for being on today too. You've been amazing. Chansu, if you wouldn't mind going next.
I think AJ said it all, and with all these, my favorite thing about PlatformCon is not. I'm a techie, right? So terminal is my happy place when I can code, when I can touch a cluster or something. But PlatformCon really brings the right mindset with having these three different slots for people, process, and technology, because this is not just about technology. This is all balancing those things, and believe me, I think tech part is the easiest part in all of these, when people and processes and making the tech to support those two the way that your organization need is the most important thing. And you can find all your questions answers in these PlatformCon talks. I think there are really great talks coming up, as AJ said. So I'm super excited about that week. So hope you are the same. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Luca. I'm going to give you the last word. Go ahead.
Yes. Well, yeah. I totally agree with you, Chansu. I really think so many times people are worried about platform engineering as being this technical problem of what tech stack do I pick and so on. Actually, most of it is really a cultural and org transformation problem. And those are some of the kind of the key topics really that we talk about at PlatformCon. So if I think you want to succeed in platform engineering, if you're just curious to figure out what it is, I think it's a perfect place to start, or also really to kind of advance in your platform engineering journey. I'm mostly obviously looking forward to the talks of my two co-panelists. They're too humble to advertise, but really, I think platform as a product, we discussed this today, is super important. Chance is talking about that, and then graph-based backends, which I really think is one of the hottest trends in platform engineering today, which is what AJ will cover. So, yeah, I mean, it's free, and you can join from all over the world. Like Alan said, we are making this more and more of a hybrid event. We're going to have satellite events in Shanghai, in Austin, in San Francisco, in New York. There's a big live day, 300 people in London. So there's a lot of opportunities to get into the mix. So don't be shy and join us.
Luca, thank you.
And thank you for having us, Alan. This is really well moderated.
Thank you. Most of all, thank you to people from all over the world who've logged in today and have contributed your thoughts, your questions, your comments, because really it's you who make these things. It's not, I mean, we had a fantastic panel, but it's you guys who do it. And thank you for showing up. We're going to do, I think we're doing another one of these prior to PlatformCon, are we not, Luca? So stay tuned.
June 4th.
June 4th, absolutely. I'll be on there. And I hope, if not, one of our TechStrong team will be, and we'll try. I hope it's as good as this one. But until then, this is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong, and on behalf of the PlatformCon folks, thank you for joining us today. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.